Karibu, everyone, karibu. For those of you who do not speak Swahili or Kurundian yet, karibu means welcome, and not just any welcome, it means a warm and hospitable welcome. So welcome tonight. You guys all look very lovely. Thank you for coming here, for being here and supporting the cause. Tonight we have a special program planned for you, and we will start out with a panel named Girls' Education, A Better Future for Us All. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and if I can say so freely, also for the panel that is assembled here, that is here present with us, but also with us via Zoom. And after that, we will also open up officially the exhibition by Nella Nyingo. Please correct me if I say your name.
Gingo.
Ah, Nella Gingo.
It's in here, Gingo.
Ah, Gingo.
Voila.
Okay. You know, when I first heard about the topic girls' education, and specifically when we talk about the new feminist current that is currently going on, I thought, well, most of the people that I know who identify themselves as female are in school or enjoy an education. And then when I learned about the numbers and the facts, I was shocked to learn that even within the Netherlands, more men enjoy an education than women. And then when you look at the global numbers, it says, according to UNESCO, it says that 129 million girls between the ages of 4 and 18 right now are not enjoying an education. And I don't know how that sounds to you, but to me, I was pretty shocked. And I was saying, like, okay, the movement, the current feminist movement that we're seeing happening again, or that has been continuing over the decades, is necessary. So without me taking over the whole stage, I would love to introduce to you our lovely panel members. So I'm gonna just read from my piece of paper, so please bear with me. Well, the initiator, the catalyst of this all is Nella Gingo. Nella is a Burundian model, photographer, and activist born and raised in Bujumbura, Burundi. She fled the country with her family during the country's civil war and has become more visible through her modeling work, and now is a source of inspiration, in particular for young LGBTQ people from the African community, for whom acceptance is not always self-evident. Then, to the left of me, we have Dr. Sheetal Shah. Dr. Sheetal Shah is the academic director at Webster Leiden campus, Webster University, USA. As an educator and change maker, she's a psychologist with a global orientation. She specializes in the field of counseling for chronic illness and trauma. Her research interests are focused in the field of modern-day slavery and human trafficking. And then I would love to introduce to you Susanna Tiapila. I hope she will appear also on the screen. Susanna Tiapila, oh, there she is. Susanna Tiapila is a deputy prosecuting attorney from Hawaii County and the founder of Pacific Institute, Navigating Justice, Education, and Health. Ms. Tiapila has authored and co-authored various articles, books, and chapters on issues ranging from child abuse and human trafficking to best legal practices. As a result of her contribution in her field, she was awarded the Donald Fridley Memorial Award for Excellence in Training and Mentoring in 2015. And last but not least, I would love to introduce to you Rachel Wexler. Rachel is an associate professor of law at Missouri Law. Wexler previously served as the Associate Director of NYU's Lawyer Program from 2019 and as an acting assistant professor as well. In this position, she received NYU's Law's Pottle Distinguished Teaching Award 2020. Besides all the teaching award and amazing things she has accomplished, she also plays an advisory role. So thank you for bearing with me, but I thought it was important to introduce everybody properly so that we can start this conversation. We will definitely also open up the floor for you to ask questions. So if anything comes up during our conversation, please, feel free to ask us questions also towards the end. Okay, I'm gonna start. Susanna, Hi. The first question will be for you. Just to also paint a picture of what girls' education and the issue is, what we're talking about today, I was wondering if you could speak about the persistent gaps and challenges in girls' access to education globally, perhaps also from your own experience, and also shed light on why it's so important to work with local organizations.
Thank you very much. And it's really an honor to be here. There's no topic more dear to my heart than that of educating girls and women. The World Bank, in a 2018 study, noted that limited educational opportunities for girls and barriers to completing 12 years of education costs countries between 15 trillion and 30 trillion in lost lifetime productivity and earnings. But it's not just about money. There are so many other indicators linked to female education. Societies where girls and women have access to education have safer, healthier communities. There are a wide range of social and economic benefits for the girls themselves, their children, and their communities. These include near elimination of child marriage, and lowering fertility rates by 1/3 in many of our countries with high population growth, and reducing child mortality, malnutrition, and child maltreatment. In my own professional experience, I work with many women who are victims of domestic victims and survivors of various forms of violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking. The vulnerabilities of women who lack access to education is significantly greater than for women who have access to education and other opportunities. Our women who have had access to education are able to advocate for themselves, their children, maintain cultural bonds within their communities, and help to build. The importance of grassroots outreach is that in our societies, it is the people within our communities who have the power to speak a language that our community members can understand and access. Being spoken to from outside of a community is often threatening and not as likely to produce investment, because we're talking about change.
Yeah.
You know, often cultural shifts, value shifts, attitudinal shifts, and that requires that we speak from a place of understanding. That understanding happens when we have local advocates and local leadership. And I'll turn it back over to you.
That's good. Thank you for definitely shedding light on that it's very important that, you know, I think sometimes as NGOs, people that want to do good, we try to decide for other people how it needs to be done, but it's really important to connect with local parties. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Sital Shah, my next question is for you. We are in the Netherlands, right? And the Netherlands claims that we are not a traditional patriarchal society. At least that's how we would like to communicate things to the outside world. But even in the Netherlands, numbers show that more men are enjoying an education than women. Could you perhaps explain why girls' education is a better future for us all? Not excluding men, but society as a whole. And how do we ensure that we continue to encourage boys and not create an imbalance within this new feminist current? Yeah.
Thanks, Roella, for your question. And there are actually multiple questions in that question. So to begin with, I'm going to say that, like Susanna mentioned, I'm glad that we are here and we're talking about this topic because girls' education matters. And I'm going to personalize this actually by saying that the only reason that I sit here before you is because there was no sex determination test available for my parents. I am the youngest of 4 daughters in an Indian society, and for those of you who are familiar, to have 4 daughters in a North Indian society means you collect that much dowry. And I think if my mother had the education that she needed, she would know that the sex of the child is not determined by her. So it's very interesting, and therefore I wanted to personalize it, why girls' education matters.
Wow.
To your first question on comparing or looking into Netherlands, if we look at society in general, I have an outside-in perspective. I've lived 1/3 of my life outside of India, so it's interesting when I look at different cultures, different societies, and you're absolutely correct that we would like to portray that Netherlands is a neutral society, gender neutral, but there are currents, and you can see those differences as well. And to the point that the previous panelists spoke about, you can see it reflect in the workforce. And while it's not about the money, it is about role models. Because if we don't see enough women out there, or if we don't see a gender balanced, it could be men, women, it could be any other gender. We are also speaking about the entire LGBTQI+ community. If we don't see representation, it does influence how we perceive the world. Therefore, representation matters.
Yes.
And therefore, girls' education, but also access to getting into the workforce. If today, again, to personalize it, if one has to make a choice that if childcare is so expensive, then let one parent stay at home. Let's ask ourselves, in the neighborhoods that we live, who is that parent who stays at home to take care of the child? And that's where it begins. So while there is access to education in the Netherlands, you see women falling out of the workforce. Then we come to the global perspective to your question, that why it matters for society that girls get educated. And again, if girls get educated, they make informed choices for themselves. Some of it already covered by the previous panelists, so I won't repeat. But most importantly, it is social education for the boys and the men.
Yeah.
Where do we see women in decision-making roles? And while we will address that as one of the questions, it is interesting that it's education, what we teach in schools and learn in schools, but it's also social education. In our social environment, in our communities, do we see that representation? And that is why, on the whole, it's not only just girls' education, but we need to make it inclusive and have enough role models for people to say it's not odd to see a woman in a decision-making role. It's not a diversity and inclusion agenda.
Yeah, that's what you're seeing a lot now.
That person is there because that person is capable. And it doesn't matter if you're a male, female, or any other gender, but respect is for the role. And therefore, I think education, again, in schools, in universities, but social education is important, especially for girls.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing that. Yes, and definitely give a hand.
Come on.
Very well spoken, very well spoken. As you were talking about role models, I definitely consider the woman to the left of you, Nella, to be a role model for the African community here in the Netherlands. Some of you don't know this, but besides all the wonderful pictures she takes and the pictures that are being taken from her, she also does a lot of volunteer work and is at the refugee center. She's super popular, because she comes there with a heart to serve. So she doesn't shout it out of the rooftops, but I see her doing things that are very impressive to me. So my next question is going to be directed towards you. Let me get my question in front of me.
Bring it on.
As we are still talking about this topic, girls' education, we want to tonight specifically focus on Burundi because we have so much more for you guys in store tonight as well to reveal. But could you share with the audience a little bit of what it looks like as far as girls' education in Burundi, and specifically outside of the capital city, Bujumbura?
Right. I think it's sort of the same thing. Girls are not often empowered to follow education. They're more put in the farming of the country, which is where the money is in the areas around the city. And therefore, if there's a little bit of money that comes from farming, the men or the boys are encouraged to go to school. And the women stay home, learn how to farm, and they cook. And then there's this other issue of a ban in 2018 that bans teenage girls from attending school if they're pregnant. They're saying that it's not discrimination because it also bans teenage fathers. But here's the issue. You can obviously visibly see a pregnant young girl. You cannot see a teenage father. So it will affect young girls in a much bigger way than the boys. And so there's one thing, and if you look at the statistics, 10% of young girls are sexually active. 40% of the girls that are sexually abused are young girls, of the people that are sexually abused. And so essentially what you're doing with a ban like that, you're punishing young girls for something they have no control over. And so I see that a lot in the villages around the city. And that just needs to change.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Yeah, thank you for shedding light on that. That's shocking to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, then my next question will be directed towards Rachel to kind of come off of what you just shared with us. Because from what we've heard, what is happening in Burundi, there seems to be a lot of crimes also committed towards younger women. My first question for you would be then, how can educating girls help to reduce crimes of violence against these girls and women? How do you think education can help solve this problem? Rachel.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for having me. Well, education serves as a protective factor against violence, abuse, and exploitation. That is what the research has shown. First of all, when girls go to school and when children go to school, they're in school rather than being forced to work in factories or mines or in agriculture. So that can reduce the child labor problem. They also build relationships with teachers and other trusted adults who they can turn to if they're experiencing abuse or exploitation at home. They have more opportunities to report their victimization and seek help.
Yeah.
On a broader level, when we're thinking about structural factors, one major structural factor that increases the incidence that drives violence against women and girls is poverty. And education is a key means of escaping poverty. It increases the likelihood of a higher income, ability to manage finances, and access credit. And so in these and other ways, education really is a protective factor against abuse and exploitation, such as through human trafficking.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if I never even thought about it. So if girls go to school, they have, it's more likely that signs of crimes will be picked up, or they can better report these crimes. Just to follow up on this really quick, if education is something that prevents crime, we know that more men enjoy education. Yet most of the crimes committed are against women. How do we resolve this educational paradox? Because you then would think if more men are educated, then crime would come down as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for that insightful question. So while there is a huge disparity, many more girls are not being educated than boys around the world. The UN, UNICEF, the World Health Organization has identified a learning crisis that affects both girls and boys. So the first reason is that there are many boys who are out of school, even though the numbers aren't as great as girls who are out of school. There's still a learning crisis that affects them. For example, globally, in adolescent boys from the poorest households, 1 in 5 of them have never been to school. And an additional 14% dropped out in primary school. Now that number from these poorest households around the world, and this was a study of 42 different countries, identified that the number for girls was nearly 1 in 3 that had never attended school. So the number is greater for girls, but there are still millions of boys who are not in school. Also, the second part of my answer to your question is that education level is not the whole story. It is only one of many factors that can impact the incidence of violence against women. Other important factors that have been shown to be correlated with the commission of violence against women are men's unemployment, familial financial stress, gender norms that devalue girls and women, and rigid gender roles is an important structural driver of violence against women. So we have to kind of expand our understanding of the complex and multiple factors that are driving the problem of violence against girls and women.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know these statistics about boys, so that's also very eye-opening. My next question will be geared towards Susanna, and then I'll come back to our panel that is sitting here, for sure. My last question for you, Susanna, would be, with your extensive experience in women and empowerment issues, what are the main advantages you have witnessed at a grassroots level that education has provided girls and women with?
I'm actually grateful for the opportunity to answer that question, and I'm going to answer it from a personal experience. I grew up in a village in the South Pacific. My village didn't get a road until the year I left for college. So it was an incredibly remote, rural village, less than 600 people, and not really accessible to most of the rest of the island archipelago because we didn't have a road. My mother was a teacher in our school, and I had a friend who my mother, and I was young, was always frustrated because this friend of mine was bright, a great potential. And my mother would often speak to the fact that this child would have no opportunities. In my village, the only family that even had high school educations was mine until the 1980s. So my mother knew this girl had no real future in front of her. But we were friends in elementary and grew apart, middle school and high school. In high school, I remember playing volleyball in the village, and everybody avoided an area of sand. And everybody sort of made comments about it. But that friend of mine had given birth very, very young, very likely impregnated by an older male in her family, but she had given birth, and that baby either died or was killed, but was buried in an unmarked patch of sand in the middle of the village Malai. And this was a young woman who, according to my mother, was much brighter than I. I've gone on to college and law school and many, many different opportunities. And I think about my friend and the many other women like her whose lives are predetermined because of the lack of education.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that personal story. That really brings it home. Again, I want to address the next question to you, Nella, because you are definitely the initiator, the catalyst for this whole movement here. So, yeah, super grateful and admire what you are doing. But then it also brought up this question to me. You have moved from Burundi. You actually fled Burundi, I think, with your family in 2015. And most people that I know, and maybe even myself, I would not want to go and do something, go back to the place that I've escaped. But we are gathered here today to really also hear stories from all over the world, but definitely focus on Burundi. And you have said, you know what, I'm going back to the place that I fled from, and I'm going to get emotional, and I'm going to give back, which is very admirable. Could you please share your heart with everybody here and why you have decided, what has moved you, inspired you to do that?
There's this African proverb, you know me, I love African proverbs, that goes, you can take the girl out the village, but you can't take the village out the girl.
Hey.
I'm sure you know it.
Can we go like this?
But with that being said, that girl is me. I'm still that girl that I was in Burundi. And so I'm able to look at it like, what did I need growing up? What were the needs around me growing up? And my story is a bit complex, as you say. I fled the country. However, it is the most beautiful country that I've ever lived in. Physically, I left, but my heart remained on that soil. And so I find it to be my duty to aid in making Burundi a safer place for women and girls. I see, if I look at my story, which is complex, when I got to Holland, growing up, my life changed when I had the access to internet and books. I remember I would go to libraries, I could read all night, all day, and it's free. I could go on bol.com, I could afford to buy a book on any topic that I wanted to learn about. And so that really allowed me to learn about the person that I was and grow into the woman that I am today. And most importantly, it allowed me to dream much bigger than the current reality. And one of those dreams was actually to create a space for women and girls in Burundi where they can have a similar experience as I had. And so, truthfully, I think that all of us here can make that happen. 100%, I know it. If just for those girls and women to have the same experience as we're having, and so that they can also dream further, far beyond their circumstances. And this is why I started this project.
Wow.
And I'm super excited for it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your heart. Let's give a...
Thank you.
Thank you. Shital or Dr. Shital. I find it so hard to say Shital.
No, Dr. today.
Okay, Shital tonight, because we're in the house. My next question is directed towards you. You shared with us that you're from India, and considering your experience working in India and in the Netherlands, and as I've also been hearing more about this project Karibu in Burundi, this popped up as well in me. In the West, we have a certain educational system, and in the East, you have a certain educational system. Does the idealization of Western education system affect the traditions and cultures of the society? I have that question also for myself a lot of times when I work with people who are not from here. So the floor is for you.
Thanks, Roella. That is actually a very, very powerful question, because we are questioning education.
Yeah.
And while we all believe that girls' education is important, education in general is important, but we are questioning education, which is a good question to ask. So take a moment and let's all of us think through our school times and our university times. And if we went to university, and the fact that what did we take away from that system? Take a moment and see what comes up. Your school, your college, your university. And while you were preparing for exams, did you ever question, would there be any other approach that would work better, which would be more inclusive, which would be more culturally sensitized? So I'll take the first part of your question, that yes, different educational systems are different. If you see a lot of the Eastern countries and Southern countries, so if you move towards Asia, you move to Africa, if you move to South America, the education system is British or American, which is already Western. I do see a trend where people seek internationalized education, and I respect that, because then it's a more inclusive perspective on education. But if we compare Western to Eastern, there is no one perfect education system. As a matter of fact, I would love to see the good parts of different education systems and we can work on a curriculum that actually focuses on it. And very often, and I was discussing with one of my students who's here with me, and we were discussing about the panel, and I made her read my notes, and I said, share your perspective. And the one thing that stood out is collectivism. So if you look at the Eastern cultures, Southern cultures, what you just said, you can't take the village out of you. It's a collectivistic mind. But it's also a mind that focuses on social capital, which means that can we all succeed together? And for me to succeed, do you need to fail? Or can we succeed together? So it's an interesting perspective on education. It takes away the competition, but it still challenges you in an inclusive manner. Therefore, I do think it's time for the education system to change, because if you look at the education system, it was actually put together hundreds of years ago. And look at the roles we have today. I mean, today the students prepare for roles that don't exist. 20 years ago when I was studying psychology, there was nothing like traffic psychology. I was like, how cool is that? Because if you drive a car or if you look at pedestrian behavior, it's all about human behavior. And that didn't exist. Environmental psychology, social entrepreneurship, these were all alien terms. But look today. So instead of focusing on whether it's arts or sciences or humanities or management, can we work on a skills-based approach? So it's a $1 million question, as I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely time to rethink the educational paradigm.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing it. And it's definitely something that I have also, when you asked that question, the things that I was thinking about were my friends. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, okay, how do I count 10 times 10?
The outfits.
Like, yeah,
The outfits.
Exactly.
energy,
All the grades.
Ewings, anybody from, no? Okay, I'm old.
Don't get started there.
Ewings, you know about Ewings? Okay, thanks. Jordans are still in.
Just one.
Yeah.
But those were the challenges we faced. So, but it's been also really interesting to figure out and to as we're learning more about the different education systems worldwide, globally, and also how to approach things in Burundi, as I'm hearing things, it's been really interesting to even question our own education system and if it's really that valuable, and what is valuable to you. Okay, we're almost approaching time because we have a wonderful exhibition downstairs with the name Redefining Legacy. Yes, our catalyst, Nella, is also a skilled photographer. And as you guys go downstairs, I think it would be good to also hear from her what Redefining Legacy is all about, what she stands for, and what the pictures are about. Yeah.
Redefining legacy. What does it mean to me? So basically how I see it, I am the woman that I am today because of the culture and the knowledge that's been passed down to me generations after generations. I see legacy as something that lives beyond us, something that can have a massive impact on the world. And so my question is, how do you define legacy when you find yourself in a place far from what you call home? How do you redefine legacy when you have to start fresh? So these were the questions that I was researching while working on that exhibition downstairs. And what I've learned is that we are all defining or redefining our legacies.
Yeah.
And I thank everyone just for being here, and I hope that you can all see that everyone involved in that exhibition is redefining their legacies.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Without further ado. Thank you.
So I would love to take this time to also open up questions for the audience. I believe that Yasmina has a mic here because everything is being recorded. So if you do have a question, I would invite you to raise your hand and ask them. Yes, over there to the left.
Talking about the educational system, and what's super interesting to me is like I have mixed kids, so for me it's a little bit difficult sometimes to explain to them, like, because they have like two cultures. What I wanted to ask you, like on the panel, is how can we change our educational system if the people that are responsible for that educational system are not the ones that are our community. So maybe I'm explaining it a little bit hard, but English is not my first language. But what I actually want to say is, like, how can we change our educational system if it's not, if the people that make the rules are not
Representing the people that are taking the education.
Well,
Yeah.
not only representing, but also are not like this, not this, don't have the same cultural background, all those kind of things. So I think there's a lot, like, a lot of things like we misinterpret just because we don't know where somebody else is coming from. And I'm really, I'm like, for the doctor, I'm really interested in how can you change that if the same people are still in the top, like in our government. To be, I'm a little bit ashamed, but it's still that same white.
Yes.
And then I think there's not going to be any change. So how do you guys see that?
Shall I take that question?
Yes. And I'm just checking in with the people online. Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr.
I think
Sheetal
that's
Shah.
a no.
Yeah.
It's actually a great
Post-corona
question.
world.
And I also hear you completely. And I empathize with you because I've walked in your shoes. I live in a village not very far from here. And my children were the only colored children in that school in the village. And eventually, I had to make a decision to pull the children out, because you can look at diversity as wow you, or you can look at diversity to say ooh you, because I don't know that much. So to your question on policymakers, because if I understand you correctly, your question is, if policymakers are not culturally sensitized, how do we have hope that the educational system is going to change? I do have some good news for you. But we also have to be patient, because if you look at education, and earlier today I said, education is like the military. It's so hierarchical. Our education system, as I shared before, the whole paradigm is 100 years old, more than 100 years old. So we need to rethink that. And if we look around us, there are so many differences. It's only time that voices are going to be heard. There is a movement to address why is it that a lot of the colored children in the Netherlands don't reach university, or the VWO as I understand, and get stuck at MAVO or HAVO. So correct, please excuse my understanding of it, that's how I understand it.
Correct. MBO.
And it's a question that why only vocational education? Then I question to say, what about language? What about understanding culture? What about understanding that different cultures have different values? So to make it more inclusive. I think globally, countries are going to be forced to rethink the educational paradigm. If we don't do it voluntarily, we're going to be forced to do it. So I do see that change happening, but it will take its time. For example, and if it gives you hope, for the first time I see in universities, and while I am affiliated to an American campus, I'm proud to say that for us it was a no-brainer to have the curriculum internationalized, culturally sensitized. But when I look at my Dutch colleagues, I do see the shift already in universities where they are getting more culturally sensitized. We are far from where we want to be, but we're taking steps in that direction. So I hope for you and your children, but the best thing you can do about your children is, if I can suggest as a parent as well, that celebrate their differences. Because if they celebrate that, wow, we are different, they will not go through life on the back foot, defensive. But they will say, this is who we are, and I own it.
No, I'm not scared for that.
Yeah.
It's more
The mic, please. Yeah.
I'm not really scared for that. It's more the amount of time it takes to
Yes.
get there. So if I now see all the people that have had like big difficulties of not getting studiefinanciering or whatever, all the things that happen right now, and everybody's turning their backs. Oh, it's so sad. And then like in 5 minutes, we all turn our backs and we're back to the beginning. So that makes me sometimes a little bit desperate. So that's more it.
Change is happening, and
Slowly.
hopefully we'll see it.
Yes, thank you so very much. I saw a question over here.
I don't have a question, but I
Oh, do you mind waiting for the mic so we can all hear you? Yes, thank you very much.
I only have like remark to what you were saying. Can you all hear me? I don't hear myself.
Yes.
Yes. You're live.
I'm thinking like my mic is not working. But yeah, the remark that I have, well, it's more an addition to what you were saying, actually, let's say that, is like here in the Netherlands, coming from a migrant family, refugees family, whatever so-called, it is like, even like people who came here to work, you know, like who built up like this whole country, basically, is like that these people were, the people here were till the day of now, actually, and it's changing because of bijeen, to be honest, is that they were looking at like their education, like the family, their education. But the thing is, was it also even if they had like a high education, but like this education was not worth it here anymore. You know what I mean? So like, it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what kind of education you have to start it like from the floor again. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's like the shitty part of it, because like other Western people come here and they can do the same job with their same diplomas. And I know like a friend of mine, you know, like he have to do his degree here again, you know, like, and I'm like, what the fuck? And my dentist did like in China their education, did in Russia their education, had to redo their education here 3 times. What the fuck? You know what I mean? Like,
I hear you.
when are we worth it? But it's also like not even like slavery time, colonialism or whatever. And you are saying like you are from India. I remember like in 2018 that they were saying like in the Guardian, like on the front page, finally India is civilized because they are okay with LGBT, right? Well, it's coming from British law, you know, like. These bitches have to stop. I'm sorry. Like I'm getting
Thank you
mad.
so much for sharing.
You know what I mean?
I hear
you. Know,
you.
They think they found everything. No, you found it through us, and then you made it yours. You know, like.
I hear you
I'm sorry,
completely.
my heartbeat is going up and up.
You're passionate about it, and it comes through. And I hear you. As a matter of fact, it was. Yeah.
It's not like about
Yeah.
between us.
Yeah. Exactly. I respect you for what you shared, and I agree with you that systems take time to change, and therefore even the law that you're referring to with regards to, in India it was called, if I'm not mistaken, Section 377, which was from the British times, which criminalized same-sex relationships. And it took us forever to change it. And again, linking it back to education and the topic for our discussion today, these systems are put into place centuries ago. And then if you go back in history, they are deep-rooted. And therefore, even to your point that yes, people who come from different backgrounds need to retrain, re-educate themselves while they come from good universities, it needs to be questioned. So a lot of good questions, actually, I take away from the panel today. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks to you.
Yeah. Is there anybody else who has, yes, I see here on the left front a question.
First of all, thank you for all these insightful comments. And well, I have first a comment and a question. Going back to the question on, I think it was for Susanna, on the impact of girls in education. I feel like sometimes it's very hard for a lot of people to realize how important it is, because we don't maybe think about the impact, or we don't see the impact. It's not like really concrete for a lot of people. And it got me thinking about this book that I read. I don't know if anybody else has read it. It's called Half the Sky. And basically in the book, it was written by a couple, and in the book they basically talk about stories of women all around the world who have gone through oppression just because they're women. And the authors, working, I think, with some organizations, have helped these women. And now a lot of them have gained education or have decided to go on to doing things that they love and are now working. And I think that in the book, they really tell you how girls' education can actually lead to concrete like an impact, because with a lot of the women that they talked about in the book, where a lot of them were able to help their villages, bring kids to school, build schools, and a lot of different things. So that's one thing that I would recommend. And a question, what do you think about like subtle features in school? By subtle features, I mean, for example, when we talk about change in the education system, and especially a change that is more inclusive of girls and women, I think that a lot of times as well, we also need to think about the books that are being read, and little things like even the pronouns that are in the books, or I don't know, if when there's a main character, a lot of times it's a man, and a lot of times stories really keep on portraying social norms and social roles. When books talk about a doctor,
Yes,
it's always
yeah.
a he.
Yeah. So your question in that is trying to...
Yeah. So basically, what do you guys think about that? What kind of changes regarding those subtle things do you guys think should also be implemented?
Could I respond?
Yes, of course.
One, I love the question, and I just wonder when you're going to be sitting on the panel. That was
Did you
just
hear that?
brilliant
Did you hear
and
that?
lovely.
So you should be sitting on
You
the
should be
panel.
sitting on the panel.
Yes, I thought that was just wonderful. And I love the book, Half the Sky. I like it. There is so much hope, and it's a sort of a devastating indictment of where we are now with respect to women and human rights. But ultimately, the book identifies strategies for hope. And so what I find so powerful about Half the Sky is that they've done what you just described. They've talked about the social norms and they gave individual examples of all these people from around the world who were able to build. And when you ask, how do we do it? You actually answered your own question. We don't accept the social norms. I remember I was a graduate student in engineering before I went to law school, and I was in an engineering class, and I had a female professor, and she referred to grandmothering in. You say grandfathering in certain laws, like you pay attention to the law because it was there before, so it's grandfathering it in. And she consistently gendered it female. And I think we can gender it many different ways. We have so many different genders right now. But I remember, this was many decades ago, sitting in that classroom and saying, as the only female in the classroom, saying, wait, that's me. And I loved it. And we can do that, and you don't have to be at the front of the classroom to take that power. As the student, you can change the language. And I've never seen change happen in an organization chart. It happens because, I like the Margaret Mead quote, a small group of committed people decide it will change. And I look forward to being in the audience when you are on a panel in not that many years. Thank you. Thank you for a great question.
And if I could quickly chime in on that as well. I do also hear you, and I think we need also publishers to publish more books written by African authors. If I look at my background, my language doesn't have he or she, and many African languages don't. When you walk in Africa, in Burundi specifically, men are holding each other, and it has nothing to do with anything sexual. Women together, and it's that whole idea of gender was brought to us by the West. And so, if we can just all return back to the root, we have the publishers having the books written by African authors, then you'll see a bit of a shift, I really truly believe, in the language spoken.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Very good. Thank you also, Susanna, and our lovely lady who brought the question. Are there any other questions in the audience?
I have a question for me. Please, I beg now.
All right, so I'm sorry, I was late. I'm right here.
Welcome, sis.
I was late, so maybe I missed like a little bit of the introduction. So my question is, because I'm Burundian myself, and I am very heavily active with women, especially young girls, so I know where you're coming from and wanting to help, but my question is, what triggered you to start this project? Because even if when you want to start a library, for example, but these women and girls, especially in the rural areas, they face so many challenges. So how are you planning to actually get them to the library? Because I'm talking about schoolgirls who drop out at maybe, 13 years old, and they don't even finish primary school, because where they live in the rural area, it's more of a girl just goes to school because they just go to school. And at a certain age, they have to find a husband or whatever. So school is not really like, an education is not a must for them. So, and most of them in the rural areas, they have to help, with the farming and whatever and whatnot. So how are you planning, to get the books there, distribution, that can happen.
Right.
But what is your plan to actually make these women and girls, listen to your project or listen to you? And also my of course, you're a woman, and you also went through challenges, but what triggered you to start this project? Why?
Right. So I'm going to try to answer your question in steps. What triggered me is obviously my own experience, the change that I've seen when I came here and when I had the access to books and the education that I wanted. So it wasn't wiskunde, grammatica, whatever you call it. It was, who am I? What does it mean? Why do I feel this way? How can I say this? How can I do this? And then I had access to the internet, and that really shaped me into becoming the person that I am today. And so that was the first trigger for me, because this is something that I was missing back home, and I wanted to provide a space in which women and young girls can have the same experience. And secondly, this is going to be not just a library. It's going to be a space where we'll have workshops, self-defense, because there's also a lot of abuse back home. We have a feeding program, because we believe that also to learn, you need to have a full stomach. Feeds the mind, the heart, and it's all aligned. And what we're doing, basically, this is not like the Western aid. I've experienced that, and it's shitty. It's actually destroying Africa. So in any of our work, it has nothing to do with saviorism. We're merely supporting the organizations and the community that is already there. And we're allowing that, I wouldn't even say allowing, we're creating a space in which they can help each other. The point is for it to become a self-sufficient project. So that is how we are aiming to help young girls help each other, educate each other, feed each other, dance together. You know the rules.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think that's a good lesson, you know, for lots of people doing work, is to do it with the community, stand alongside of people.
Merely
So,
supporting.
specifically, representation in this case is
Right.
is obvious. Are there any questions still as we close out? Last question over here.
Yeah, you already mentioned that the system in the Netherlands is very hierarchic. But what can teachers do? Because I am a teacher, and sometimes I don't know what the fuck to do. I just want to run out of the school. So yeah, what can we do except for being more patient?
We can learn, and I say we because I'm also a teacher. Yeah. And sometimes when I don't understand the culture, I ask questions and I learn. So I have a suggestion. You can learn from the parent who raised that question, actually. Well, exactly. How do you influence? But if you understand the story behind the question that the father asked, I'm going to call you a father instead of a gentleman, because that's the role you bring to the table today. That experience will inform your next interaction. So when you have somebody that is different in the class, the conversation today, and I hope you have a conversation after this panel discussion, because that will be a learning in terms of his challenges, their challenges, and also what they bring to the table, that why cultural sensitization matters. And then you take it forward. And when you have an opportunity to lobby or make a change in your school, and it can start with you, that you bring that up, and once you start using your voice, you will be so surprised as to how many people say, I hear you and I want to be with you. So there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So, good luck to that.
Good luck, yes. Good luck, lots of luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hashtag no pressure. I have really enjoyed this panel, this conversation. I really also enjoyed all of your input and the passion that I'm feeling. I definitely hope you guys will continue that passion by scanning on the QR code pretty soon downstairs. So you can actually do something, but we will give you more instructions later. Because it's one thing to talk about something, and then it's another thing to actually bring that into action. So for those of you who grew up in the Netherlands, and I heard somebody knows about Ewings, so you must have seen Sesame Street on TV. I used to watch it every time before I go to bed. It's like you watch Sesame Street, right? And as I'm not, I don't really like to read that much, if I'm honest. I just downloaded, last year I downloaded Audible, so I listened to audiobooks. However, when this specific woman would come on TV and read, I was there. I feel somebody's feeling me there in the left. I was there, and it would just be like, like a balm over my heart, right? You see? Yeah, it'd be like a balm over my heart. So because we are talking about girls' education, because, Nella shared with us, it was the escapism in books and edifying your mind through that was one thing that really supported her. We have invited the queen, the lovely mother, grandmother in the house, the lovely reader, to share something from her heart with us, and then also to read a piece to encourage us all here. So without further ado, I would love to ask Gerda Lenten-Havertong to come and join us here.
It's very enjoyable to hear this, huh? The queen, the grandma, everything.
Calm down.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I'm very proud of you. Thank you for asking me to be here. Thank you all for being around. Ik mag het in het Nederlands doen. Want ze verstaan allemaal Nederlands.
Ja, klopt.
Aan mij is gevraagd om op deze avond met jullie te delen wat lezen en schrijven voor mij betekent. Especially for me. Dus denk erom, het gaat niet over jullie. Het gaat dus gewoon over mij. Want ik weet niet of je het begrepen hebt, maar ik ben de oudste hier in huis, I'm sure. Ik kijk even rond. Ik weet het zeker. En dat betekent dat je eigenlijk... ik kom uit een samenleving met verschillende bevolkingsgroepen. Als ik het goed heb, zijn het er misschien wel 21 bij elkaar. Die er in Suriname wonen. Ik ben geboren in Suriname, om precies te zijn in Paramaribo. Nou, toen ik opgroeide in dat land... en dan denk ik aan een moment van dat ik niet zeker weet of ik al goed sprak, maar ik wist wel wat ik zei. En aan de andere kant wil ik zeggen dat een meisje zijn voor mij toen al heel belangrijk was. Wij woonden in Juroso, huurhuis. Het huis is dus niet van jou. Als je hier in een eigen huis woont, ben je al bijzonder. Dus daar duurt het even. Ik kom namelijk niet uit een familie, een gezin... dat zich van alles en nog wat kon permitteren. Nee, ik kom gewoon uit een gezin waarvan mijn vader... om te worden dat wat hij uiteindelijk geworden is in die samenleving... een cursus volgde vanuit Nederland. LOI.
Ja.
En daardoor is hij kapitein op de binnenvaart bij de LBB geworden. En de LBB is Slansbosbeheer. En Slansbosbeheer was dus niet Suriname. Dat werd daar niet mee bedoeld, want we waren niet onafhankelijk. Slansbosbeheer was gewoon... Nederland is... Suriname is van Nederland. Want al het hout dat er bijvoorbeeld werd gekapt in de bossen... dat werd naar Paramaribo vervoerd door de boot waar mijn vader kapitein op was. En dat werd naar Nederland gestuurd, dat hout. Dat kwam hier naar Slansbosbeheer in Nederland. Want dat was echt Slans, Nederland. En daar gebeurde het. Dan werd het in ieder geval in orde gemaakt voor gebruik. En dan ging het terug naar Suriname. Want dan moest Suriname het kopen. Dus eigenlijk, je eigen dingen gaan mee. En dan mag je dus weer het totje nemen door zelf ervoor te betalen. Maar dat is een slimheid wat een vorm van handel is... waar wij dus eigenlijk ook als Surinamers dat zouden moeten leren. Maar daar wil ik het niet over hebben. Ik wil het hebben over wat er gebeurde toen ik dus dat meisje was... dat ongeveer 4 jaar oud was en alleen maar bedacht dat zij schooltje wilde spelen. Marita wilde geen schooltje spelen. Marita wilde vader en moedertje spelen, huisje. Er was geen vader, maar ze was allebei tegelijk. En ik moest altijd de baby zijn en aan de borst hangen. Nou, je begrijpt dat dat een ongelooflijk probleem was... als je zelf schooltje wil spelen en de ander wil huisje spelen. Dus dan werkt het niet. Met het gevolg dat ik alleen speelde. En mijn spel bestond uit verhalen vertellen. Ik lees al vanaf, ik denk, mijn 3e jaar. Bij ons kwam thuis de krant, iedere dag, de West, heet dat. En dan las mijn vader de krant. Die zat dus altijd de krant te lezen. En dat vond ik heel bijzonder, dat lezen wat hij deed. Hij leest nooit luidop. Dus elke keer als ik onder het huis was, dan las ik daar de krant aan al die flessen die ik klaar had gelegd. Die stonden daar en die waren mijn klasje. En dan las ik ze voor. Ik weet niet precies wat, maar ik las ze voor. Want het had voor mij een gevoel van ik vertel iemand wat. Als je iemand wat vertelt, dan geef je jezelf al een waardering. Want het feit is, wat hier allemaal gebeurt, is dat wij verteld hebben aan elkaar. Het praten met elkaar, vertellen aan elkaar, de taal spreken met elkaar. Dat bepaalt je waardigheid in een samenleving. Hoe vinden we onze plek in een samenleving als je de taal niet spreekt, als je de taal niet machtig bent? Dan kom je altijd ergens erachteraan. Altijd. Het is bekend dat toen wij niet-witte mensen, nu zijn we mensen van kleur. Er zijn een heleboel namen geweest, hè? We komen van diversiteit, nu zijn we mensen van kleur. En ik word daar helemaal verdrietig van als ik die mensen van mij hoor zeggen ja. En dan de mensen van kleur die je nu denk ik, hou op zeg. Dus niks is anders dan het feit dat je ergens vandaan komt en je probeert in dat land die vaardigheden die het land heeft tot je te nemen. Het begon met de migranten en de gastarbeiders. En Nederland kent heel veel namen. Namen. En de gastarbeiders, ja, wat wil dat? Die gastarbeiders die moeten bij elkaar wonen. En ze hebben gehoord dat ze de Nederlandse taal niet hoeven te leren. Want ze gaan toch terug. Heel lang geleden in Suriname was dat ook zo. Het slavernijverleden. Nou ja, wat ik hiermee wil zeggen is dat als je iemand zegt, jij hoeft het Nederlands niet te leren, want je gaat toch terug. Je mag teruggaan, je mag. Ja, dan leert hij het ook niet. En dat is wat we nu hebben. Dat een groot deel van onze landgenoten van kleur, van elders vandaan, het net niet halen. Sommigen hebben totaal die Nederlandse taal niet tot zich genomen, weten het, kunnen het niet spreken. Moeders die thuis blijven, die wel de teugels in huis in handen hebben, maar buiten de deur niet meer. Want je bent minder. Je bent eigenlijk, als je de taal niet spreekt, dan word je onrustig. Een klein voorbeeld. Ik ga naar China of Japan en ik ga naar de trein en ik sta daar, een heleboel mensen staan er. En die trein komt aan. En als die trein aankomt, zie ik al direct die Japanners, die schuiven zo. Alsof ze door iets uit elkaar worden gebracht. En ze schuiven. En ik wist niet welke kant ik op moest. Daar stond ik in het midden. En tikte er iemand mij op de schouders. En, nou, ik ga dan maar aan een kant. Maar wat gebeurde er? De deuren gingen open. En de mensen die zo geschoven waren, dat was voor het publiek dat uit de trein komt. Niemand staat in de weg en niemand doet iets om erin te komen voordat je eruit komt. Dat zijn vaardigheden die je van een land leert. Dat zijn de manieren die je van een land leert. En in Nederland leren we een boel. Maar in Nederland wordt ons ook we worden heel erg opgevouwen. Je hoeft het niet te leren, je hoeft dat Nederlands niet te leren. Want je gaat toch weg. En wat er gebeurt, met wat je uiteindelijk tot je neemt, bepaalt wie je bent. Dat is dat kleine stukje wat ik ga mijn tijd nemen. Dat is dat kleine stukje wat ik wilde gaan zeggen. Kijk, dat schooltje spelen heb ik gezegd. En dat had dus echt krant lezen. Ik deed echt allerlei dingen. Je weet, de mens is slecht al bij voorbaat. Ik weet dus al, als meisje van 4 jaar... weet ik al dat ik ook dat lelijke in me heb. Want dan, die fles die kapot was, die had het altijd gedaan. Die heette Koba. Koba, wat heb je gedaan? Koba, je bent gevallen. Koba, je hebt me elke keer weer. En dat is wat we doen. We kijken altijd naar de verschijning en bepalen onze mening daarvoor. En dat is niet iets wat vrouwen alleen hebben. Dat hebben mannen ook. Want dit verhaal over de taal tot je nemen gaat voornamelijk over mensen, maar in dit geval over vrouwen. Want als vrouwen al bij voorbaat niet de gelegenheid krijgen om te zijn die mensen die ze kunnen zijn in de totaliteit, dan kun je er niet van verwachten, als het de taal niet machtig is, dat het dan toch een plek kan veroveren. Want dat is wat we moeten doen, een plek veroveren. Waar ben ik? Oh ja. Als kind is mij veel verteld. Mijn grootmoeder, oma zeggen wij, in plaats van oma. Oma heeft mij heel veel verhalen verteld. En de verhalen waren meestal verhalen over slavernij of verhalen over spinnen, Anansi-stories. Daar ben ik helemaal mee. Ik ben doorspekt ervan. Dat was fijn, dat vond ik prettig. Maar mijn grootmoeder vertelde altijd in het Saranantongo. En we moesten thuis Hollands praten. Hollands. Weet je wat Hollands is? We moesten thuis Hollands praten. Want anders was het niet in orde. En het was een dubbele reden. Of je was ondergeschikt aan al het andere wat wel goed Nederlands sprak. Of je behoorde tot de plebs in die samenleving. Daar komt de taal niet naar binnen. Daar komt de taal niet door. En algemeen beschaafd Nederlands, nou, daar kun je Surinamers mee doodslaan. Vooral die Kriolen. Die willen zo graag het beste Nederlands spreken in dat land. Ik ben een Krioolse namelijk, jij ook. Weet je, al die zwarte mensen. En dan heb je de Hindoestanen en dan heb je de Javanen. En zo heb je 21 soorten bij elkaar. En ieder heeft zijn eigen taal. Maar wij spreken met elkaar het Nederlands. Dat is de afspraak. Nederlands is de voertaal. En dan moet je ervoor zorgen dat je dat goed doet en goed kan. Mijn grootmoeder sprak dus alleen Saranantongo. Ik was ongeveer 12 toen ik ontdekte waarom mijn grootmoeder alleen Saranantongo sprak. Mijn grootmoeder was analfabeet. En het was een klap, ik wist niet wat ik daarmee aan moest. Omdat er altijd was gezegd, je moet echt goed Hollands leren praten en dan kom je verder. Dat was in mijn kinderhoofd van een jaar of 12. Oma is verder, oma is groot geworden, oma is mijn oma. Hoe kan het dat ze dus niet kan lezen en niet kan schrijven? Nu is het zo dat deze vrouwen waar wij het nu over hebben, dat zijn vrouwen die al van jongs af aan in een gemanipuleerde omgeving zijn. Mijn oma was niet in een gemanipuleerde omgeving. Maar mijn oma kwam wel uit een samenleving die haar en haar voorouders daar naartoe gebracht hebben. En uiteindelijk zijn gebleven waar ze haar naartoe hebben gebracht. Hebben gezegd, jullie moeten Hollands praten. En dat heeft zij nooit geleerd. Maar ze was wel een sterke, flinke, bijzonder vaardige vrouw. Die met mijn grootvader een plantage heeft gerund. Ik zal jullie niet vertellen hoe de plantage heet, want je weet nooit wie in de zaal zit. De taalontwikkeling, heb ik gezegd, is zo van belang voor ons als we ons willen duiden. Als je als vrouw wordt opgepakt in landen waar deze dames het erover hebben, dan moet je rap zijn van tong om je verhaal te kunnen doen. En als je analfabeet bent, dan... ik hoorde net dat er in Burundi geen enkele... je hebt geen DT en geen grammatica en geen hij en zij en al die ingewikkelde dingen. Dat maakt het eenvoudiger als wij op deze manier denken aan het feit dat we verhalen willen vertellen. Ik ben niet of nauwelijks voorgelezen als kind. Dus het zit ook een beetje in het karakter van het beest dat het soms iets pakt en vasthoudt. Ik heb 2 kinderboeken gehad. En het ene was de 10 brandweermannetjes. En het tweede was de rattenvanger van Hamelen. Het heeft totaal niets met die samenleving waar ik vandaan kom. Maar ik kende die beide boeken uit mijn hoofd. Ik kon ze zo opzeggen. En waarom? Omdat die keuze die gemaakt is van... wij kunnen geen boeken meer kopen. Wij kunnen ons dat niet permitteren. In mijn gezin, bij mijn ouders. Waar het ging om die 2 boeken. Dus mijn moeder die las gewoon iedere keer dat voor. En ondertussen was er een broertje bij en nog een zusje erbij. Het was helemaal geen punt. Maar wat wel van belang was, was dat ik verstond en begreep waar het over gaat. Daar ging het mijn ouders om. Ik moest verstaan en begrijpen. Daar ging het mijn vader om. Zijn kinderen, die moesten het altijd verstaan en begrijpen. Want dat brengt ze ergens in een samenleving. Een samenleving is communicatie. Als we niet met elkaar communiceren en als we op geen enkele basis elkaar waarderen voor dat plekje wat we veroverd hebben of wat we zijn, dan zullen we altijd blijven vechten. En dat gevecht, ik weet niet wat het gaat opleveren. Weet je, ik ben al 3/4 van die rotonde gepasseerd. Meneer Wortman, ja. Jij ook, zegt jij niet. Nee, ja, dit is niet leuk. Dit noemen ze, hoe noem je dit weer in de theaterwereld? Een beetje iets doen waar de rest van het publiek niet eens weet waarom je dat doet. Weet je? Maar dat is wat ik van belang vind om gezegd te hebben. Ik wil nog ook heel even gaan naar de sociale media, waar het nu allemaal om gaat. Wat doet de sociale media voor de vrouw als zodanig? En in welke positie voelt de vrouw zich als het gaat om die sociale media? Om die kennis die we zo graag willen ontwikkelen. Om die plek te veroveren die we willen hebben. En waar we van respect afgedwongen willen hebben. Naar alle waarschijnlijkheid heb ik geen medestanders daarin. Ik ben heel ongerust over de sociale media. Wat het met mijn kleinkinderen doet. Maar ik begrijp, als ik mijn kleindochter, ze is 13... als ik haar een appje stuur met 3 regels, stuurt ze me 1 met 2 woorden. Ik begrijp niet wat die 2 woorden gezegd. begrijp het niet. Nou, die emoties krijg ik aan de lopende band. Maar die wil je dan wel begrijpen, weet je? Maar ik heb me dus nu voorgenomen dat ik ga dwingen, dat ik ga opleggen, dat ik zeg dat dat gebeuren moet. Naar mij. Wat haar ouders zeggen, daar kan je je niet meer mee bemoeien. Maar ik wil hebben dat die vrouw, waarvan ik denk dat ze dat worden zal, uiteindelijk. Ja, absoluut. Dan wil ik hebben dat zij het besef heeft van dat het belangrijk is dat je goed spreekt, dat je je duidelijk uit, dat je zegt wat je te zeggen hebt en dat iedereen het verstaat en dat iedereen je begrijpt. Dus hoe wil ik dat doen? Alles wat ik wil vertellen maak ik nu gewoon een dicté van een opstel. Ik maak een heel verhaal en ze moet mij antwoorden met een verhaal. Ik wil niet meer met 2 woorden, want ik weet niet wat SG is. Ik weet niet wat IG is. Ik weet het niet. Ik weet niet wat ze me geantwoord heeft. Ik heb er geen begrip van. Dus gelukkig dat we die sociale media hebben. Ik ontdek ook absoluut positieve dingen. Geheel en al. Maar ik ben bang dat ik mijn collega's, de mensen met wie ik al die rotonde gepasseerd ben, dat ze tegen me gaan zeggen, ik besef me dat. Dan denk ik, wat is dit voor taal? Ik irriteer me dat die mensen dat doen. Het is geen Nederlands. Maar goed, we hoeven ons geen zorgen te maken, want meneer Aldaar, die heeft wat dat betreft heel duidelijk gezegd hoe we dat met die curriculum moeten aanpakken en wat we daarmee moeten doen. Dus het zal wel goed komen. Lezen en schrijven is een onderdeel van je welzijn. Tot slot. Als je dat niet beheerst, en dan geldt dat voor iedereen, maar dan voor vrouwen in het bijzonder. Vooral vrouwen die weggehaald worden op plekken waar ze niet graag zouden willen zijn. En dat ze op plekken geplaatst worden waar ze totaal niets of een nobody worden. Realiseer je dat als je niet lezen kan, zoals ik niet op die trein heb kunnen lezen, dat het erom gaat dat je in een wagon gaat wat naar links staat. Het staat op je kaartje. Niks begrepen aan deze vrouw. Totaal niks. Maar dat is wat ze deden. En je kunt die vaardigheden leren in een land. Maar als je de taal niet spreekt, wordt het altijd een stuk moeilijker en dan duurt het een stuk langer. Dank jullie wel. Ja. Dank je. Nou, ik vind het zo apart. Ik heb eigenlijk echt niks geweten van New Metropolis Zuidoost. Echt helemaal niks. Per nasi per mijn libi, toch? Maar tegelijkertijd weet ik dus ook helemaal niet dat share, network, dat ook een begrip geworden is inmiddels in alle bewegingen die er zijn. Maar dat er ook nog zoveel andere vrouwen zijn die zich hebben hoe noem je dat? Gedompeld in de strijd die geleverd wordt door jullie. De strijd die geleverd wordt. En nu heb ik een stuk toegestuurd gekregen door Ruella. En waarin Ruella me vraagt, wil je dat aan ons voorlezen? En bij voorbaat wil ik jullie zeggen dat het geschreven is. Het is een manifest eigenlijk. Door Michaela Koele.
Kool, ja.
Nee, Koele. Koel staat hier. Want weet je wat ik zo bijzonder vond? Je schrijft Michaela Kool. Kool. Michaela, kool. Maar je zegt koel. Met een C. Dus ik vond het heel bijzonder, want het is een bemoedigend stukje. Een persoonlijk manifest. Ik schreef over de veerkracht die ontstaat als je geen vangnet hebt en een ladder moet beklimmen zonder vaste grond onder je voeten. En dan waren alle ladders ook nog eens gammel. We moesten klimmen voordat we konden lopen. En we moesten ook zo snel mogelijk klimmen, omdat de ladders dreigen te breken onder je voeten. Ik zei dat mensen moesten blijven klimmen, uit liefde voor het klimmen. Wat hun talent ook was. Niet uit financieel oogmerk of zekerheid. Want wat is zekerheid? Omstandigheden, zoals het land waarin je geboren bent, of de familie waarin je bent opgegroeid, ervoor kunnen zorgen dat je geen educatie kan volgen. En ja, zelfs ook hier in Nederland. Maar dezezelfde omstandigheden kunnen ook iets heel anders met je doen. Ze kunnen vastberadenheid kweken. Een meedogenloos streven je droom na te jagen. Iets wat iemand die altijd zekerheid heeft gekend, nooit kon ervaren. Vanavond nodig ik ons allen uit om die figuurlijke pen op te pakken en ons eigen verhaal te schrijven. Verander jouw verhaallijn en buig het in jouw voordeel. Michaela, cool.
Dank u wel, hartstikke bedankt. Wilt u nog eventjes hier blijven? Want we hebben wat... Ja, we gaan het nu wel...
Ik ga direct weer zitten, ik ben heel gehoorzaam.
Dank u wel. Dank jullie wel. Ook, oh, wow, I'm speaking Dutch all of a sudden. Language matters in this case as well. Nini, I was wondering if you could... Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to thank the panel... And also wanted to ask Angelique Hoogmoed, are you upstairs here? Yes, to come forward. Yeah, you can bring all of them and just give you... Yes. To our panelists on Zoom, we do this in spirit, virtually. But thank you very much, Dr. Sheetal Shah.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. Give her a hand. Gerda and Angelique. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Gerda Havertong.
Thank you, Miss Lady.
Yes, geachte Gerda. And thank you very much, Angelique, for hosting us tonight. Again, we are here for a purpose. You've heard many... Can I have your attention just for maybe 1 minute? Thank you. We've heard a lot today. We've heard a lot about girls' education. We've heard specifically from Nella Nyingo's heart and her vision as well. No, I felt like I was...
You added an S to it.
Ooh, okay, almost there, almost there. But y'all know her. I hope your heart was stirred. I hope you feel like you have a voice. I hope you feel like you have a pen to write your story with. I hope you feel like change will come if we endure and if we continue to connect and support one another in the community way. Perhaps I can even say in the African way. And with that, I would also love to encourage you to do that by scanning on the QR code, because this will go directly to support girls and women in Burundi. And I think that together we can make a difference, right? Yes. Because I know I've known Nella now for a while, and I've got to experience in the way that she does things, and I am confident that this will leave a lasting legacy. So without further ado, get up, mingle. There are drinks downstairs. There's music. There are beautiful pictures to view. Again, thank you very much for your attention.
Shout out to Arakaza. Don't forget Arakaza. Arakaza. Shout out DJ Arakaza.
Yes.
Woo, woo, woo.
You guys know who's doing the music? It's DJ Arakaza. A Burundian DJ.
And of course, a warm applause for the moderator, Roella.
Oh, yeah.